Hey, welcome back to Disclosure and another perfect day in paradise up here a mile above sea level and at the foot of the spectacular Colorado Rockies. We were just discussing before the show started, a lot of us used to live in California, how we miss the ocean, but
yes,
the Colorado Rockies really do make up for the lack of ocean. We're sitting here a mile above sea level. And Gene, we really had some spectacular mountains in British Columbia where you and I grew up, or you grew up and I failed to grow up.
And I always the Canadian Rockies are beautiful.
Yeah, and growing up, I always assumed, those must be the biggest in North America. Those are the biggest mountains in the whole world other than Everest, because they look so big. But did you know that the highest peak in the Canadian Rockies, that's Mount Robson. Did you ever go to Mount Robson as a kid?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's you pass it on the highway between Prince George and Edmonton.
Yep.
If you've never heard of those places, look it up on a map. It really exists. And,
they're way up
there.
And
no, we don't live in igloos and we don't drive dog sleds. We were in the car.
But Mount Robson.
Mount Robson is actually a little under 13,000 feet. It's 12,972 feet to be exact.
Interesting.
Right? That's factoid of the day.
Okay.
By way of contrast, there are more than 50 peaks in the state of Colorado that are over 14,000 feet.
Yeah.
They actually have a name for them here.
Yeah, local Coloradans call them 14ers.
Do we call people who live in Colorado Coloradans?
I think so.
Aren't they the Coloradi?
No, I don't
They're the
think
Coloradi. All right. So they call them 14ers. You're right.
14ers.
And there's more than 50 of those around here.
Yeah.
And the mountain right next to our office here in Loveland is called Longs Peak. And it rises to 14,259 feet. That means it's actually 1,300 feet, roughly, 1,300 feet taller than Mount Robson.
But that's kind of surprising, isn't it?
It is surprising, right? Here's the difference. Mount Robson looks bigger.
It does.
Because it has a prominence of more than 9,000 feet, right? And that means that it rises. I've got this. I've written down some numbers, and I've got them completely wrong here. Mount Robson looks bigger because its prominence is bigger.
Right.
We're here at 5,000 feet, and so there's only 9,000 feet to go until you get to the top of Longs Peak. And so it rises less above the surrounding landscape. Its prominence is lower, but its peak is higher. Did that make sense? Did I explain that correctly? Because I wrote down completely wrong numbers. I said the prominence was like 2,000 feet.
Well, essentially,
that's not true.
Robson looks taller because, the area around it is lower. Whereas here in Loveland, we're already 5,000 feet. So the 14,000 doesn't look as high from our perspective.
I think that's what I said.
Yeah, more or less.
More or less, but I said it in kind of a roundabout way. Yeah. Prominence versus actual altitude, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So there you go. I was reading, I like wackadoodle sort of alternative history, right?
Yes, I definitely know that about you.
I'm not into ancient aliens built stuff and South American stuff, but I am absolutely convinced. There were an awful lot of people who made it to North America ahead of Columbus, right? The Vikings did. We know that for sure now. We're finding evidence that there were Phoenician explorers and Roman explorers in the Mississippi at some point, and somebody was mining copper around the Great Lakes. And so there is one theory. I have no idea how real this is, but there was an explorer from China, I can't remember the name, who went somewhere across the Great Ocean and then describes mountain peaks and aspen trees, and then sort of measures the distance between the mountain peaks, and it just happens to correspond to Longs Peak and its surrounding peaks here in coincidence, maybe. Or did the Chinese visit Colorado a long time ago and go, man, can't grow a thing here, forget it. Went back home.
It's too cold.
No, it's not cold. It's not cold.
No,
here.
actually, it's beautiful.
All right,
I love Colorado.
The point was prominence.
Okay.
Prominence versus altitude.
Well, what does that have to do with our disclosure program today, Shawn?
Absolutely nothing.
Wow.
Except for the fact that we're going to be looking at the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay.
And he thought he was a lot bigger than he actually was, too. How about that?
Okay.
All right. Because he was just looking at prominence. He was comparing himself to other human beings. And there's no doubt he was bigger than life. Everyone thought he was big, but you compare him to the King of Kings, the creator of the universe, and suddenly he's nothing. And that's kind of the subject of Daniel chapter 4. So that's where we're going to go today. But just before we get to that, I wonder if you saw that news story about the ski lift in Georgia. Did you see that?
Yes, you shared it with me.
Yeah, it started running backwards and at like 3-4 times the normal speed it looked like. And so a lot of people got terribly, terribly hurt.
Yeah. They were flung off.
Yeah, and so people were standing down at the bottom of the ski lift as it was coming to the final corner at the bottom, yelling, "Jump, jump, jump." And some people were looking, man, that's like 8 feet. I don't want to jump. I'll get hurt. But they ignored the warning, and when they went around the corner, they got terribly hurt. And I was looking at that thinking, there's kind of a gospel message in there. We're told, surrender now. And coming to Jesus is kind of a painful thing. So there's this voice saying, jump, get off of this sinful world. But people cling to it. They're a little scared to make that jump. And so they go around the corner and get terribly hurt because this world is destined for, well, sin and death and pain and suffering.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just wondered if you saw that. It's horrific. You know, if you've got a
really
sensitive
sad.
heart, don't go look for that video online.
Yeah.
But they were calling jump, jump, jump. People wouldn't. Okay. So there you go. Just that one little news item I thought I'd sneak in there. So we've talked about prominence and ski lifts. Those kind of go together.
Yeah, that's true. They do.
Mountain
you've
peaks
got
are
a
the
mountain theme here. Good Colorado
of the
theme.
day.
So we should probably get to our subject, though, which is Daniel chapter 4. What do you think?
Yeah, okay. Let's get into Bible study. Go grab a Bible if you've got one around the house, or you can find one online. It's always good to follow along and look at the text that we're actually looking at. Let's get started. This chapter of the Bible, Daniel chapter 4, appears to be written by Nebuchadnezzar himself because it's actually written in the first person. So he either dictated it or maybe wrote it himself, right? I don't know. He probably, knowing the culture of the day, he probably had a scribe write it. He's probably pacing back and forth.
He dictated.
Yeah, intelligent, powerful people didn't write. They spoke, and other people write. And actually, back in those days, you know, in the world BC, in these ancient Semitic cultures, writing was actually considered menial labor.
Interesting.
Now today it's kind of like the leisure class has time to write, but it was menial labor. So he probably dictated it. One way or the other, Nebuchadnezzar wrote this chapter of the Bible.
Okay.
And that's kind of an amazing thought.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
All through the Bible, Babylon is used as a symbol of God's enemy. And not just as a symbol, it really was God's. Babylon is the root source of everything that goes wrong in the world. It's the city of human self-sufficiency. It starts as Babel in the plains of Shinar, and all through the 6 times in the book of Revelation, it's brought up as a symbol of rebellion against God and everything that's wrong in this world. And yet here we have this entire chapter of the Bible written by the most famous king of Babylon.
Wow.
A king of Babylon is an author of the Bible. So do not tell me, and people do this all the time, oh, there's segments of society that are out of reach of the gospel. We don't know how to reach the postmodern mind. We don't know how to reach the secular mind. Don't ever tell me that anybody's out of reach, because here we have the king of Babylon becoming a spokesperson for God and an author of the Bible. So, you know, the Bible teaches, Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 11, that God has put eternity in the human heart. Everybody out there's fighting God in some way. They may not know his name, but they're fighting God. Saul was fighting God. He becomes the Apostle Paul. Nebuchadnezzar is fighting God, and he becomes a spokesperson for God and an author of the Bible. So this chapter is probably a letter or proclamation that was included in the text of Daniel's book because, well, Daniel read it and considered it to be inspired.
Yeah, and of course, at the beginning of the book of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar could hardly be considered an inspired messenger for God, could he?
No, not from any reasonable human perspective, right?
Right.
Daniel chapter 1, he's sacking the city of Jerusalem.
Right.
He's taking the temple vessels, putting them in the temple of the Babylonian gods. Daniel chapter 2, he gets a warning message from God that his empire, as great as it is not going to last forever, and that he's going to be replaced by an inferior kingdom, which of course happened historically. It was the Medes and the Persians. Chapter 3, he shakes his fist at the God of Daniel, and instead of accepting the message of the dream from Daniel 2, that the head of gold would be replaced by the chest and arms of silver, he makes an entire statue made of gold.
Which, of course, was in stark contrast to the statue of Daniel 2, which was made of different metals. Only the head, the part that represented his kingdom, Babylon, that was the only part that was made of gold.
Right.
So, you know, when he built this golden statue, he was essentially saying, there's no way another kingdom's going to conquer Babylon. I mean, Babylon's going to last forever.
Right. Right. So no, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't look, I think I agree with you, does not look like an inspired messenger from God. If anything, he's almost always on the wrong side of the equation.
Right.
In that story that you just referenced where he builds the entire statue of of gold, he's saying, no way, nobody's going to replace Babylon. I am the history of this world. Nothing's ever going to change. He's like Hitler. Hitler, I know.
Wow.
That Godwin's law says that if you bring up Hitler, you've already lost the argument. But Hitler, basically, you know, he suffered the humiliation that Germany went through at the close of World War I.
Right.
And he looks at it and says, no way, I will succeed where Napoleon failed. I'll build an empire, a Reich that lasts 1,000 years. I'm permanent. This is forever. That's what Nebuchadnezzar does by building that statue of gold, right? So he doesn't look like an inspired messenger. But at the same time, you can't ignore the fact that several times in the book of Jeremiah, God calls Nebuchadnezzar my servant, which really says something amazing about who God is willing to use.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess if you think about it, anybody that God is willing to use has flaws. We all do.
Some of us more than others.
Very true. Very true. And it's kind of like prominence, like we were talking about earlier. Nebuchadnezzar's sins, they look big when you compare them to, an average everyday human. So they have a big prominence, but in terms of elevation alone, the contrast between human sin, sea level, perfection, we all look pretty bad,
That's
don't
right.
we?
Right. We love to point fingers at Nebuchadnezzar and say, ooh, what a sinner, because his prominence seems bigger than ours. But in
Right.
terms of altitude, I think you're right. We're all up there. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And that's why this story is so useful, because even though Nebuchadnezzar was a king and an empire builder, he's still a human being. And so this story applies to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Should we dig in?
Yep.
All right.
Daniel chapter 4 and verse 1.
Verse
Go ahead.
1.
You be
Okay.
the reader.
Okay. Daniel 4, verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar the king, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I thought it good to declare the signs and wonders that the Most High God has worked for me.
Let me stop you there. If only Christians were that eager to declare what God has done for them. Here, the king of Babylon's eager to talk about it, and we kind of silence ourselves. We don't really share it. Yeah. Psalm 107, verse 2, let the redeemed of the Lord say so, and that's what Nebuchadnezzar's doing.
And it does kind of put us to shame, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm. Picking up in verse 3, how great are his signs and how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. Well, Shawn, these opening verses makes it sound like maybe Nebuchadnezzar got the message, doesn't it? Instead of insisting that Babylon's eternal, that his own greatness will never be surpassed, is he finally cluing in that the only kingdom that will last forever is the kingdom of Christ?
Yeah, I think so. That's exactly the point of Daniel chapter 4. He's finally conceding the point that God was trying to get through to him through Daniel in chapter 2, and for that matter in chapter 1 and 3 as well. Mm-hmm. Human kingdoms, and this is one of the big themes in the book of Daniel, human kingdoms are going to pass away. This incredibly long experiment we've been living in human self-government, this incredibly long rejection of God's kingdom will come to a close, and God is going to restore the peace and order that used to exist in this world before we rejected his authority. And the reason this story is in the Bible is because we all have to learn that same lesson. And the lesson's simple. I'm not in charge. Not ultimately. You cannot be the captain of your own destiny and hope that the ship lands in a safe harbor. You just can't. In fact, when you continue through the book of Daniel, you meet more characters who also need to learn that. Darius the Mede has to learn that. The little horn power of Daniel chapter 7, that power's got to learn the same lesson. We're all pretty sure that we're the best judge of how the world should be run. I know I am. I know how it should be run. We all want to chart our own destiny, but one of the biggest lessons that comes out of Daniel's book is that human beings are irredeemably flawed.
Right.
We aren't capable of running the planet. In fact, we've made a huge mess out of it. And I hear the music. So before I make a huge mess out of this show, we should probably slow down and
take
a pause. We're in Daniel chapter 4, and Nebuchadnezzar's finally getting the point. After 3 chapters of stubborn resistance, 3.5, he gets the point. We'll be right back.
Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions? Like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness? Does my life really matter to God? Or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers that you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home. There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like A Second Chance at Life. You'll find answers to the things that matter the most to you. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.
During the break, my wife was asking me, what did you just say? You should take your headphones off during the break.
Yeah, I know. You said that to me. That's
like,
that's what I heard. Take your headphones off during the break.
No, what I was saying is I'm a little stuffy. Can you hear it in the microphone?
I can't hear it.
I'm trying not to sniffle because that's disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about Daniel chapter 4.
Daniel chapter 4.
Yeah, and the conversion of Nebuchadnezzar. And just before the break, we were mentioning the fact that the big lesson in Daniel is that human governments are going to fail. They will never solve the problems.
Right.
They're the result of rebellion against God and his divine government, and that the only real solution is the kingdom of Christ. And in chapter 4, after 3 chapters of stubbornness, or 3.5, because half of chapter 4 he's stubborn, Nebuchadnezzar finally has it all figured out. And by the end of chapter 4, he's already foreshadowing the language of Daniel chapter 7. He uses some of the very same words used to describe the very end of time in Daniel 7. And in Daniel 7, you see the last judgment way off in the future. So let's pause and go over there to Daniel 7.
Okay.
And the judgment comes to a verdict in Daniel 7. This is verse 26. But the court shall be seated, and they shall take away his dominion. Who's his? That's the little horn power, who, of course, is the ultimate manifestation of human rebellion against God's kingdom. He's the culmination of everything. He's depicted in Revelation 13 as the sum total of all the kingdoms of the earth. Babylon, Medo, Persia, Greece, Rome. It's this conglomerate animal. They shall take away his kingdom to consume and destroy it for how long? Forever. Then the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Now notice, this is interesting, a little side note, this is Christ's kingdom, but it's given to his people, the saints of the Most High. And in Revelation 3, verse 21, it tells us that when Jesus gets his throne, he shares it with his people. We get to sit on the throne with him. We don't deserve it, but we do.
Wow. So, Shawn, what we get in the rest of Daniel chapter 4 is the story of how Nebuchadnezzar finally comes to that conclusion, right? He kind of acknowledges the God of Daniel at the end of Daniel chapter 2, and again at the end of Daniel chapter 3. He almost comes over the line, but then it's here in chapter 4 that he has this radical conversion experience.
He's just like every other human being. You flirt with God, you flirt with conversion, you flirt with repentance, and you almost make the decision. You You admit that it's right, but you don't make a decision. That's the story of Nebuchadnezzar, and it's really the story of us too. Let's pick it up in verse 4. This is Daniel 4, verse 4. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. Now, here's how I kind of picture this. Right? I'm using sanctified imagination. Nebuchadnezzar is hands down the most successful Babylonian ruler since the days of Hammurabi, who was the great lawgiver back in the ancient kingdom of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar is the Neo-Babylonian Empire. He's not the most ancient iteration of this empire. He's the Neo-Babylonian Empire. It's many centuries after Hammurabi, but Nebuchadnezzar's reign is a time of revival among the Babylonians. They'd been suffering invasions from the Assyrians who lived in Nineveh up to the north, and Nebuchadnezzar's father finally defeated all of those Assyrians, and that paved the way for a time where Nebuchadnezzar could spark a huge revival in the city of Babylon. So he does a number of things. He finishes the royal palace. His father started it, never finished it. Nebuchadnezzar says, we've dealt with the Assyrians, let's deck this place out. He used imported materials, imported cedar, used a mountain of gold and silver and precious stones, and it came to the point where the palace was so nice that every other king on the face of the planet was like, okay, I can't compete with Babylon. I can't afford that. So there's the palace.
Luxury.
He rebuilt the city of Babylon, or at least got engaged in infrastructure projects. The Euphrates River came right through the city of Babylon. Under the walls, kept water inside. They were very secure because they had an endless supply of water and could be locked inside the city. Just in case anybody attacked, they would never, ever run out of water. And if they did swim under the wall, there were lock gates along the river as well. But he designed a brand new bridge that went over that river, and it was so specially engineered that the pillars diverted the flow of the river and slowed it down so that it wouldn't erode the foundations of the walls or the bridge itself. It was an engineering marvel.
It's really impressive.
2,600 years ago, right? Yeah, he was doing things that we're just figuring out, in our recent generations. He also worked on the wall around the city. It got bigger under Nebuchadnezzar. It was so wide that you could drive 2 chariots side by side along the top, and it was so high that no army would ever be able to climb over it. It made the people of Babylonia. That's not bad, though. Babylonia.
That works almost.
The people of Babylon, they felt very secure because of this giant wall and the water source. And you'll find allusions to their false sense of security over in the book of Revelation. God points to their sense of security, and he's got the people of Babylon in Revelation 18 saying, I sit as a queen. Nothing can ever happen to me. That's the attitude that they had.
So this luxury, this wealth, that kind of explains Nebuchadnezzar's insistence that no other empire could ever sack the city of Babylon or take
They
over
felt
the world.
perfectly secure.
Yeah.
Another thing that Nebuchadnezzar did in his time was build a brand new set of temples dedicated to the Babylonian gods, like Bel-Marduk. Marduk being, I think, the chief of the Babylonian gods. See, over the years, the temples had fallen into disrepair and Babylonian religion had kind of fallen into disfavor. Enthusiasm for religion started to wane when everything was crumbling around them. So Nebuchadnezzar rebuilds the Babylonian temples, and they're so drop-dead gorgeous by the time that he's finished that it sparks a revival of the old Babylonian religions. He sparks religious revival in Babylon.
Interesting. And so you have the Babylonians giving credit to their gods for their victories. They enjoyed lots of victories under Nebuchadnezzar, and they even renamed the Hebrew captives after their gods. Of course, Daniel, he becomes Belteshazzar in honor of Bel-Marduk, who you just mentioned.
Right.
And then we think of the three young Hebrews, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They instead become Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
All embedded with Babylonian religious concepts and the names of Babylonian gods, right?
Yeah.
So we have a revival of religion under Nebuchadnezzar. We also have the most famous renovation of all, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which was one of the seven wonders of the ancient world.
Wasn't that built at his wife's request?
Yes, it was,
Yeah,
right?
I
She was from
remember
Persia, and Persia had beautiful mountains. And I guess she moved to Babylon out on the plains of Dura, and it was perfectly flat. You could watch your dog run away for 3 weeks, And so she missed the homeland and complained about how flat the landscape was. So Nebuchadnezzar says, here's what we'll do. I'm going to build you an artificial mountain in the middle of the city, and that's the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. So she's from Colorado, he's from Kansas. If you want to put that in sort of modern terms,
There you go.
she's like, oh, Kansas is so flat. Babylon is so flat. I miss the mountains, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now in chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar has finished conquering the world. He's finished rebuilding the city. He's enjoying the fruits of his labor. And he's resting in his house and flourishing in his palace. Right. Then he gets a second dream from God. The first dream that he gets is Daniel 2, but now he gets a new one. Verse 5.
Okay.
I saw a dream which made me what?
Which made me afraid.
Right, made me afraid. Here's the most powerful man in the world, and a dream makes him afraid. Same thing happened in Daniel 2.
Yeah.
The thoughts of my bed and visions of my head troubled me. This is exactly like Daniel chapter 2. He has a disturbing dream, and it bothers him a lot. So what does he do? Well, he does exactly the same thing he did in Daniel chapter 2, even though this time he should know better. What does he do? He calls for the Chaldeans and the wise men. Daniel 4, verse 6. Therefore I issued a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. See, it's just like Daniel chapter 2. Then the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers came in, and I told them the dream, but they did not make known to me its interpretation.
Yeah. So it's like a repeat of what happened in Daniel 2.
Exactly. Replay of the dream, right?
Yeah.
We really do. It's a strong indication that what's about to happen in Daniel 4 is intricately linked to the narrative of Daniel chapter 2. When you see patterns repeat in the Bible, pay attention. In Daniel and Revelation, you get the same ground being covered again and again and again, and God looking at it from another angle or adding more detail to heighten your understanding. So if you see the same story as Daniel 2 playing out, you know the story is linked. They're related.
Makes sense.
Right? And God's going to take them down the same path again and now really drive home the point that his kingdom won't last forever. Most modern readers tend to break up the book of Daniel into chunks, treat it like a collection of different stories. But again, that's an artificial thing. We do that because of the chapters and verses we inserted in the 1200s. I think Stephen Langton, 1207, was the Archbishop of Canterbury, and in his career put chapters and verses. Very useful, but it tends to make us break up a book into chunks that are artificial.
Yeah.
Right? The chapter and verses, they're useful. I mean, because it means that we can tell
we
people
can
where
find
we
our
are in the
place.
Bible.
Right.
But it has the unfortunate side effect of chopping up the story and making it look like an anthology instead of a single narrative.
Continuous. Yeah.
Right. So you're absolutely right. This is a strong tie to Daniel chapter 2. And in that chapter, God explains the human kingdoms that are going to pass away and that the kingdom of God is going to replace all of them. In chapter 3, you have Nebuchadnezzar pushing back against that. And now in chapter 4, God drives home the point. He builds the golden statue in Daniel chapter 3, and God in chapter 4 says, oh, no, you don't. Right.
Right.
This is our clue that Daniel 2 is useful information for us understanding what's about to happen. For that matter, so is the whole beginning of the story where the king publicly admits that the dream of Daniel 2 is completely accurate, right? And of course, if these stories are parallel, you can predict what's going to happen next. You know what's going to happen next,
well,
right?
they're going to have to go and find Daniel to
Exactly.
interpret.
It's exactly what happened in
Right.
Daniel 2. Verse 8. But at last Daniel came before me. His name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God. You'll notice at this point he's still clinging to his Babylonian gods, and they're credited with giving him the empire. In him is the spirit of the holy God. He's recognizing something about Daniel. So the story starts in Babylon. The whole Bible starts in Babylon. The whole story of the Bible is God comes to where you are, and then he leads you step by step to where he is. So here we have Nebuchadnezzar still clinging to his Babylonian gods. In him, in Daniel, is the spirit of the holy God, verse 8. Now he shows how this story makes him change his mind from the Babylonian idols to the God of Abraham. I told the dream before him, saying, verse 9, Belteshazzar, still a Babylonian name,
Right.
chief of the magicians. Now, how would you like as a Christian to be called chief
That's
of the
your
magicians?
title?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Now, they weren't doing magic tricks. These are the
Right.
magi, kartum in the original Aramaic language. Everything from Daniel 2 and about halfway through verse 4 to the end of Daniel 7 is actually written in the Aramaic language. That's a language that was picked up when the Jews lived in Babylon. When they came back to Israel, they actually didn't speak Hebrew anymore. And so they had the leaders in the temple would have to read a section of the Bible and then paraphrase it in Aramaic for everybody. So that's Jesus spoke Aramaic.
Of course. Yeah.
It's kartom, magi. It's not, these were the wise men. But still, he's called chief of the magicians. And it's good to remember that even when you do well as a Christian in this world, the public's going to misconstrue what's going on, right? They're going to attribute it to their own gods because they don't quite have an understanding. Okay, Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy God is in you, and no secret troubles you, explain to me the visions of my dream that I have seen and its interpretation.
Isn't it interesting, Shawn, that he knows that Daniel's God is the only one with the answers, and yet he still went to his own gods first?
I know. The
Habit.
It's easy for us to pick on him from 30,000 feet in the air because you can see
Sure.
the whole story, but we're all a little that way.
Absolutely.
Sure we are, right?
Yeah.
I suppose that having his wise men fail was probably a potent reminder that, ooh, yeah, they failed me before. And the only real answer came from a Hebrew captive the last time. Now the story changes just a little bit. And you'll remember that back in Daniel 2, the king doesn't actually tell Daniel the dream, right? He didn't tell the wise men either. I had a dream, and if you really are who you think you are and say you are, then tell me what I dreamed. Then I'll believe you can interpret it.
Yeah.
And they couldn't do it.
They couldn't.
Right. And that's the way it was. He wanted to know that Daniel's God was really speaking to him, and Daniel did pull it off. God showed Daniel what he'd been dreaming. But this time now in Daniel chapter 4, after a lifetime, I hear the music. They're playing the music. I'm about to make the most important point of my whole career as a minister, and they start the music. Okay. This time, it's different. After a lifetime of experience, he already has a higher level of trust.
Right.
And he hands Daniel the dream. So when we come back from the break, what we'll do is we'll pick up with the dream. You'll find that in Daniel 4 and verse 10. If you don't have your Bible open, you might want to go and grab it. Or if you're in a place where you can't really pay attention right now, grab the podcast from voiceofprophecy.com and go through the book of Daniel chapter 4 with us. We're going to take a short break and tell you about some amazing things from the Voice of Prophecy. And then we'll be right back with Daniel 4 and verse 10.
Disclosure is just one of the programs brought to you by the Voice of Prophecy, like the audio adventure program Discovery Mountain. Discovery Mountain is a weekly Bible-based program for kids of all ages and backgrounds. Your family will enjoy faith-building stories with Jake Donovan, Mr. Simon, and others in this small mountain town. Each summer, campers visit Discovery Mountain, where they sing songs, learn about God, and reenact a Bible story with the help of drama teachers Miss Wendy and Miss Tamra. With 24 full episodes every year and programming every week, your family will have something uplifting to listen to every week. Listen to episodes on demand and watch video features from Director Doug at discoverymountain.com or on your favorite podcast platform. That's discoverymountain.com.
And we are back from the break. And we're going to have to start moving along because, well, you're just so chatty, Gene.
Oh, yeah. Gene's the chatty one in this marriage.
You're just so chatty. You keep burning up time, and time is
Chatty.
precious.
Yes.
Yeah. We're in, I think, segment 3 now.
We are.
Segment
Daniel
3.
chapter 4.
Daniel chapter 4 and verse 10. You remember we were just saying before the break that in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar wouldn't tell anybody the dream, but this time he does. And he goes to Daniel. He told the Chaldeans the dream. They couldn't interpret it. Verse 10. These were the visions, he's speaking to Daniel now. These were the visions of my head while on my bed. I was looking, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. You know, one of these days I'm going to wake up and describe my dreams to you like that. Gene,
And the height was great.
Behold, in the night visions, I had visions in my head upon my bed, and the visions were these. I'm going to do that tomorrow morning. That'll be great.
That'll be fun.
Hey, we're married, by the way. Just in case you're listening, wondering why I'd be in the same bed with the lady in the studio. We are married. I want to point that out because someone was in studio a while ago saying, why is he so forward with that lady? Well, because we've been married for like 25 years. Yeah. Okay. Verse 11. The tree grew. Here's the dream. It's a tree in the midst of the earth. The tree grew and became strong. Its height reached to the heavens, and it could be seen to the ends of all the earth.
Big tree.
Big tree. Its leaves were lovely, its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it. The birds of the heavens dwelt in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it. Okay, before we go any further, let's do a little dream analysis here. Let's talk about this dream.
Okay.
This is a huge tree, and it's located in the middle of the earth.
Right.
So you go back to ancient cultures, they all thought they were the center of the earth.
Yeah.
That everything revolved around them. It's really saying that. That was true of the ancient Celts. Matter of fact, people out there that are fans of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, what Tolkien was doing was taking a concept from the ancient Celts. Middle Earth was Mediolanum in Greek, and today the map is dotted with ancient Celtic settlements that are called Middle Earth. So, for example, the city of Milan is a contraction of Mediolanum in Latin for Middle Earth, and it was originally a Celtic settlement. We know the Celts were in northern Italy,
they're
almost
Celtic
800 years before Christ. They were up there. They're all over the place. Everybody thought they were Middle Earth. If I understand correctly, a lot of the native tribes that live around here in Colorado considered Pikes Peak to be the middle of the earth.
Oh, interesting.
This big prominence.
Yeah.
It's very common.
Okay.
This is a huge tree in the middle of the earth. It's central to the experience of the whole planet. It says that it reaches to the heavens and you can see it from everywhere on the whole planet. Right? Secondly, it also says that this tree of life was a source of food for all, for everybody. Every living creature was supposed to find nourishment from this tree. Okay, back in Daniel 2, Nebuchadnezzar was the head of gold. And so that makes him the most prominent of the Gentile kings and kingdoms.
Right.
And now he's a massive tree. That's what he is, designed to feed the whole planet. It's a pretty good indication of just how powerful and influential Babylon really was. Today we talk about American influence around the world and how it shaped the planet, or maybe the British Empire and how it influenced the world in the 17 and 1800s. But back in Nebuchadnezzar's day, Babylon and its culture shaped the whole planet. There's a reason we all still remember Babylon to this day, right? You can find traces of Babylonian thinking absolutely everywhere in our culture, right down to the math we use and the way we tell time.
How so?
All right, I knew you were going to pin me down on that, so I'm ready. Let's consider the way we tell time. Most of us use base 10 mathematics, right? We count in ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, base 10 mathematics.
Right.
You count to 10, you add a digit. Count to 100, you add a digit.
Right.
1, tens, hundreds, thousands. That's base 10 mathematics. The Babylonians used base 60 mathematics. They went through 60 units before they added a digit, if you wanted to sort of think of it as an analogous. They had 60 seconds to a minute, 60 seconds to an hour. They measured circles using 360 degrees, and we're still using that math when we do trigonometry and aerial navigation to this day.
Interesting.
Right?
True. Yeah.
Okay. So we still have traces of it. We have astrology, that's Babylonian. We have Babylonian ways about thinking about political power and so on, but back in the day, the influence was unmistakable. There are traces of it today. We still have it in our culture today, but in that day, the Bible speaks about Babylonian thinking shaping human thought all over the world, and then prophecy says that it's actually going to shape human thought all the way down to the end of time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So is that what it's talking about when it says that all the world ate from the branches?
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. Yes and no. This is the surprising part of the story. God isn't talking about Nebuchadnezzar's personal greatness or the incredibly wicked influence of Babylon. He's actually talking about what he wanted Nebuchadnezzar to be when he allowed that empire in the first place.
Okay.
It's telling us God had a purpose for Nebuchadnezzar. And because Nebuchadnezzar wasn't doing what God expected him to do or wanted him to do, he's running into trouble. Verse 13. Here we go.
Okay, Daniel 4.
Yeah. I saw in the night visions of my head while on my bed, and there was a watcher O Holy One, coming down from heaven, he cried aloud and said thus, chop down the tree and cut off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts get out from under it and the birds from its branches. So you have a watcher from heaven, a Holy One, clearly a representative of God, coming down and saying, oh, time to cut down this tree. Verse 15. Nevertheless, leave the stump and roots in the earth. So that's not the end of the story. The chopping down doesn't finish the story. Leave the stump and the roots in the earth bound with a band of iron and bronze. If we had time, we might explore that those show up in Daniel 2, those elements too, but another topic, another day. In the tender grass of the field, let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let him graze with the beasts on the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from that of a man. Let him be given the heart of a beast. Let 7 times or years pass over him. The gist of the dream is this. Nebuchadnezzar is about to be humbled. It's going to last 7 times or years. This is a last-ditch attempt to bring Nebuchadnezzar to his right mind. And the way that God's going to do that is by letting him lose his mind for 7 years. He becomes like an animal. And now Nebuchadnezzar wraps up with these words in verse 17.
Okay.
This decision is by the decree of the watchers, and the sentence by the word of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdoms of men, gives it to whomever he will, and sets it over the lowest of men.
Wow.
Right.
So really, Nebuchadnezzar already knows what this dream is about, at least in a sense. He heard the watcher, the angel, say that the whole purpose of the dream is to let the world know that God is actually in charge, and whoever rules here on this earth, they only do so because God allows it.
Exactly. God allows it. It certainly seems that way. He's still not clear, though. Nebuchadnezzar's not really entirely clear on the meaning, so he asked Daniel to explain it more. Let's jump down to verse 19.
Okay.
Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonished for a time, and his thoughts troubled him. So now it's not just the king who's troubled by the dream. Daniel's starting to understand it, and it bothers him. So the king spoke and said, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its interpretation trouble you. Now, here's the first cracks of compassion from King Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah. Belteshazzar answered and said, my lord, that's Daniel, by the way, right? We've mentioned that. My lord, may the dream concern those who hate you, and its interpretation concern your enemies. So now we know this is going to be bad news. Daniel says, oh, I only wish this was about your enemies instead of you. Right.
Wow. Shawn, I find Daniel's attitude to the king interesting. He's a captive, he's a prisoner, and Nebuchadnezzar had caused all sorts of trouble for him. We remember his friends were thrown into the fiery furnace, and still, this humble prophet, Daniel, he only wishes the best for the king. I'm thinking we could learn something about how to handle other people from this example from Daniel. It's really Christ-like, isn't it? I think of Matthew 5, verse 44, but I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. Daniel's really doing this here.
It's a great point. It's a great point. And I think somebody might say, oh, it's just Stockholm Syndrome. You learn empathy and sympathy for your captors. But I think you're right. This is Jesus shining through Daniel.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the dream. Here's the interpretation, verse 20. The tree that you saw, which grew and became strong, whose height reached to the heavens, and which could be seen by all the earth, whose leaves were lovely and its fruit abundant, and which was food for all. Food for all. You see what God's intention was? Yeah. Nebuchadnezzar was to feed the planet somehow. And not feed the planet wickedness. God allowed him to have all this influence for a more noble purpose. Right. Where were we? We were for food for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and in whose branches the birds of the heaven had their home. It is you, O king. It almost goes without saying at this point, but he's making sure he understands. It is you who have grown and become strong, for your greatness has grown and reaches to the heavens, and your dominion to the end of the earth. Yeah. So we know we're right about the meaning. The tree is Nebuchadnezzar, his kingdom, just like the head of gold. So let's jump down to verse 25, where Daniel starts to unpack what it actually means. They shall drive you from men. Your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make you eat grass like oxen. They shall wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 times, that's years, shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he chooses. So there's no question why Nebuchadnezzar is going to become an animal living in the field, right? He's going to lose his mind. The whole point of this exercise is to remind him that everything he has is only there because God permitted it, allowed it. He only has the kingdom of Babylon because God chose to give it to him.
Right.
And that suggests that God must have had a purpose for the king. There must have been a scenario in which Nebuchadnezzar doesn't have to become an animal. If he's obedient, he doesn't have to become an animal, and he continues being prosperous. That has to be an alternative, or God's not punishing him, logically. There must be a scenario where Nebuchadnezzar learns the lesson the first time around and humbly submits to the will of God after Daniel chapter 2, and he becomes a servant of God with influence over the whole planet.
Wow. So what would that be?
Well, let's think about it. Let's think about this. The Jews failed to become a light to the Gentiles. God made it very clear. Isaiah 42, Isaiah 49, Isaiah 60, Isaiah 56. Over and over and over again, God says, I want you to be a light to the Gentiles, and I want my house to be a prayer for all nations,
Yes,
right?
House of prayer.
But they didn't do that. And they'd actually, instead of doing that, begun to live like the heathens. They're worshiping false gods. They returned to the religions of Abraham's forefathers, Chaldean religion. So God essentially packs up the people of Israel, said, look, I'm not going to force you into my kingdom. Go back home. And he sends them back to Chaldea, where Abraham came from.
Right,
It's kind of like
right.
he's returning a defective bride. That's what he's doing. And when they get there, God starts speaking to the Babylonian king. And if the Babylonian king converts, that will demonstrate to God's people what he's been trying to do with Israel all along. He's saying, look, the Gentiles will listen to you. They will come to the light. They will convert. They will become a part of my chosen people. Now, we can really learn from that. And it gives us a huge clue as to what Nebuchadnezzar was resisting. He's getting punished for not fulfilling his role the way Israel was being punished for not fulfilling theirs.
Wow.
And when you see God working hard to convert the Babylonian king in the first 3 chapters, and Nebuchadnezzar's resisting, then you get a pretty good idea as to what the tree is all about. Israel was not a light to the Gentiles, so now God is going to use the Babylonian king to do the same job, but he's resisting. So Israel goes into exile, and so does the Babylonian king now, in a matter of speaking. Verse 26. Go ahead and read that for us.
Okay. And inasmuch as they gave the command to leave the stump and roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be assured to you after you come to know that heaven rules. Therefore, O king, let my advice be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by being righteous, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps there may be a lengthening of your prosperity. I like that Daniel tells him there's still time to change, that if he starts to obey God, maybe his personal prosperity will be lengthened.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah.
And that says a lot about the way that God actually sees the world. Believers, Christians to this day, still have this tendency to divide the world up into us and them.
Yeah.
There's us, the believers, and there's them, the heathens. And they make it all black and white. But when you read the Bible narrative, it's really not that simple. It's not clear lines between us and them.
Sure.
We have God's people sinning, and we have heathens that are more open to God's word than the believers supposedly were.
Yeah.
It's not that simple. God calls Nebuchadnezzar his servant in the book of Jeremiah. He does the same thing with Cyrus, the Persian king. And if you think about it, that's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Nebuchadnezzar's the guy who sacks the temple in Jerusalem, takes the sacred temple vessels, puts them in heathen temples dedicated to Babylonian gods, murders the sons of the Israelite king in front of him, and then he blinds the king, puts his eyes out. And that
Terrible.
that man is a servant of God.
Yeah.
And that
Wow.
means there's hope for me.
Absolutely.
No matter what I've done in my life, God can still use me. He can turn it all around for you right now. He's got a purpose for your life, just like he did for Nebuchadnezzar. I hear the music. It means we're going to have to take a break. We're going to come back and wrap up this discussion of Daniel 4 and see what Nebuchadnezzar has to learn and what we have to learn. We'll be right back.
Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness? Or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home. There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like, Does my life really matter to God? And A Second Chance at Life. You'll find answers to the things that matter most to you in each of the 26 Discover Bible Guides. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.
Round 4 in a discussion of Daniel chapter 4. And Jean, you were yawning during the break. Am I that boring?
No.
Am I that boring? You were yawning during the break, and then you were like drinking water and had your headphones off, and and then you noticed the show was on.
No, I paid attention. I took my headphones off so I could hear you talking to me in the break.
We're talking
but
about
I am Yanni. I
Yeah.
don't know why, and it's not the topic.
We're talking about Nebuchadnezzar and the fact that God had a purpose for him even when he was bringing Israel into captivity. And
Right.
Nebuchadnezzar's not what you might call an ideal candidate for the position of servant of God. But then again, who is?
Yeah,
right?
true.
The Apostle
Yeah.
Paul? Nope. He persecuted Christians.
Yeah.
Right. So, and of course, Paul is the man who?
Yeah, he wrote most of the New Testament for us. So, Shawn, what does that say about us? What does that say about any of us, really?
It tells me it's not too late. Right? Maybe somebody listening figures that they've gone too far. They'd love to know God. They'd love to be a part of God's family. But they've done things, they've said things, you've maybe been places, and you feel like you're disqualified. But you need to understand that God loves to do the impossible. That's the story of the Bible.
Definitely.
He takes huge delight in taking the most impossible case on the planet and turning it around. He's in the business of completely restoring people and setting them loose in this world to do great things for him. I mean, just look at the whole Bible. Gideon, the wimp. God uses him. Moses, the murderer, God uses him. David, the adulterer, God uses him. The list goes on and on and on.
Yeah. And Shawn, even when we look at the genealogy of Jesus that's recorded for us in Matthew, there are several women there that maybe you wouldn't expect to be in that genealogy.
Yeah, list some of those for me.
Oh, there's Tamar. Remember, she dressed like a prostitute and slept with her father-in-law.
Yeah, disgusting.
Kind of manipulating him. Then, of course, we've got Ruth. Ruth was from Moab. We've got Bathsheba.
Oh, no, but why is it important that she's from Moab?
Well, the entire nation that only existed because of incest, because of Lot's
Right,
daughters.
exactly.
That's the Moabites. That's their history. And then Bathsheba. Bathsheba, of course, she was the wife of Uriah, but then David killed Uriah so that he could marry her. So she, she has this marriage that started based on adultery. And then we've got Mary, Mary, the mother of Jesus. Not that she did anything wrong or that there's anything about her character, but, it looked like maybe she did something wrong to the outside world. She became pregnant before she was married to Joseph, and that would have looked like something that was not appropriate.
All stories of ill repute.
Yeah. And yet, all of these women are in the family line of Jesus. And that tells us something. God can take our worst moments, deep shame, and he can completely turn it around.
And that's exactly what happens for Nebuchadnezzar. Verse 28. All this came upon Nebuchadnezzar at the end of 12 months. It's a whole year goes by. God gives him another year to get things right. And at the end of 12 months, he was walking about the royal palace of Babylon. The king spoke, saying, "Is not this great Babylon that I have built for a royal dwelling by my mighty power, and for the honor of my..." How'd you like my Nebuchadnezzar? My mighty power, and for the honor of my majesty.
Yeah. So he really doesn't fully get it. He still thinks Babylon's going to last forever, that he's the greatest man who ever lived. It's like he's still living a little bit in Daniel 3, where the whole statue's made of gold.
That's exactly right. He gets a warning. He's scared that day, but 12 months goes by, and he's back to his old self. And that's the story of us all.
Absolutely.
You read the Bible, you come under conviction, 12 months goes by, and you're back to your old self.
Yeah, or less.
God has just told him through Daniel that he gave this kingdom to Nebuchadnezzar, but he's still walking around on the roof of his palace saying, "I did this," right? And it's at that moment that the prophecy comes to pass. "Oh, is that right, Nebuchadnezzar?" God says. "Do you think you did this?" Verse 31. While the word was still in the king's mouth, a voice fell from heaven. "King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken. The kingdom has departed from you. They shall drive you from men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field." And it goes on to describe the fact that he becomes an animal living in the field. He loses his rational faculties.
Like the prophecy said would happen.
Exactly. And they put him out to pasture like an animal for 7 years, literally out to pasture. And it's the only way he's going to learn that none of us is anything apart from God. The only reason any of us wakes up in the morning, the only reason we live at all is because God allows it, right? The Creator allows it. In the beginning, God breathed into us the breath of life, the Bible says in Genesis chapter 2. And without God's life-giving creative power, none of us would exist. Yeah. Colossians 1:17 tells us, in him, Jesus, all things consist. They have their existence. Acts 17, in him we live and move and have our being.
So would that mean that when we hit tough times, it's possible that God's trying to remind us of something?
Yeah, I think so. But we have to be careful with it.
Absolutely.
Right? You remember the story of the man born blind? The disciples are wondering who committed the sin that made him deserve blindness. Did his parents do this, right? Or him?
Yeah.
Jesus said, well, it's neither.
Right.
Sometimes bad things happen to good people for no reason other than the fact that we live in a broken, sinful world.
Right. And of course, in the case of Job, it happened because the devil was trying to make God look bad by making good people miserable, hoping that they would give up on God.
Right. Put all the blame on God. That's exactly right. But still, when you read the story of Nebuchadnezzar, you do have to ask yourself whether or not God has allowed many, in many instances, he's allowed tough times to fall on us because we need a little bit of character reformation. It does happen. This story tells us that. He might be trying to remind us that we need him. He might be trying to remind us that we are not the source of our greatness, right? We don't make ourselves great. It's not always going to be the case. We have to be careful. Don't judge other people. But when it happens to you, you should slow down enough to ask yourself, have I been rebelling against God? Have I been resisting him? Is he trying to get my attention? You should at least consider that possibility.
Yeah. I know the times I've drawn closest to God in my life have been when things have been difficult in my own life. That's just
It doesn't
been a
even mean that
pattern
God
personally.
did it to you necessarily.
Absolutely not. But
in this case, he does.
In this case, he does. But in our own lives, it can just be an opportunity
He'll
for
use it.
clarity.
He'll use
Because
it.
he will use if we let him. Yeah. So this lasts for 7 years, which of course, in the Bible, 7 is that perfect number, that number of completeness and prophecy. It's a literal 7 years, I imagine. I mean, the Bible doesn't seem to indicate that it would be otherwise. Yeah. Is it significant?
Yeah, I think so. It might be God's way of telling us he's doing exactly what needs to happen in order to bring Nebuchadnezzar around. He doesn't give him more than he needs. He doesn't give him less than he needs. It's the perfect punishment to bring Nebuchadnezzar around. It's a perfect reformation, a perfect change of character, a perfect object lesson. And by the end of the story, Nebuchadnezzar finally gets it. Verse 34.
Okay.
And at the end of the time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my understanding returned to me. Now, that's kind of a double-barreled statement. First of all, he stops thinking like an animal, and he gets his human reasoning back. So in that sense, he gets his understanding back. But if you think about it, it's also true in a secondary sense, or maybe this would be the primary sense, and this is the point of the whole conversion experience. You might say that Nebuchadnezzar gets his understanding back in the same way that all of us get our understanding back when we finally surrender our hearts to the God of heaven. The Bible talks about the renewing of our minds in Romans chapter 12. So we all need a renewal of mind.
Right.
We all need this Nebuchadnezzar experience. And sometimes God allows you to hit bottom so that you finally realize, I'm not driving the boat.
Yeah.
I'm not in charge. I can't solve my own problems. And then your understanding deepens. My only hope is in Jesus Christ, who created me, and in him I have my being, and he's got my future as well. So we're originally created, before sin, with a sense of humility, joy, and trust. And most of us are born into this world with that same sense of dependence and humility. When you're 1 year old, you're dependent and humble. But over time, you get jaded and self-sufficient. You find it harder and harder to trust God.
That's true.
Right. So at the moment of conversion, though, when you allow God into your life, you regain your original sense of understanding. We're finally seeing clearly again when we come to Christ. We're understanding the world the way we were supposed to in the very beginning.
Ah, yes. Of course, Jesus said, unless you become like little children, you cannot inherit the kingdom of heaven. And of course, he's not talking about chronological age. It's that experience you just described of that innocence before
birth.
you're jaded.
A restoration to innocence. So Nebuchadnezzar gets his understanding back in every sense of that word. Now, how can we plow through the rest of this chapter in 5 minutes?
Oh, we can do it.
Let's give it a try. Let's give it a try.
Okay.
Daniel 4, verse 34. And at the end of the time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my understanding returned to me. And I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. You see it? He finally gets the point of Daniel chapter 2. God's been trying to make this point now for 4 chapters. Human self-government is an experience in rebellion, and it's not going to last forever. We've all lost our collective minds when we rejected God's government. But no matter how big the mess we make, God's going to sweep aside the mess and reestablish his kingdom. Verse 35. All the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. He does according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. No one can restrain his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" Now, we do that all the time because we can't see the end from the beginning. We shake our fist and say, "Oh, God, what have you done?" Right? We can resist God for a little while. He's allowed our rebellion to foment, that's word of the day, foment. On this planet. Or ferment.
Yeah.
Well, that's a
Some of
fermentation.
both.
Yeah. But we don't call the shots ultimately. Go ahead and cough. That is my wife coughing. Do you know why that happened?
thank you.
Do you know why that happened? It's
Why?
because you took a drink of water on air.
No, I took the drink because I was going to cough, but it didn't
All right,
help.
all right. You lost your mind for 7 times right there, 7 seconds.
Yeah, no.
Okay, verse 36. God's not going to allow this misery and suffering that we've created to continue forever.
Right.
Because that's not what a God of love does. Okay, verse 36. At the same time, my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my honor and splendor returned to me. My counselors and nobles resorted to me. I was restored to my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added to me.
Oh.
I love that phrase.
Yeah.
Excellent majesty. Now Nebuchadnezzar
gets
gets
it.
it.
Yeah.
The only real greatness anybody has is found in a relationship with the Creator.
Amen.
We are only great. You and I only have a kingdom when we use our lives to reflect the beauty of Jesus Christ. The only thing that lasts forever is when you tie into the kingdom that's going to last forever. The only real greatness is when you tie into the real greatness of Jesus Christ. Verse 37. Of course, that greatness came through humility.
Yes.
Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all of whose works are truth and his ways justice, and those who walk in pride he is able to put down. If you look at it, that's the conclusion the whole human race comes to in Revelation chapter 15. All your ways are just and true, O Lord, King of saints. This here is the very last thing we ever hear from Nebuchadnezzar. It's it.
Yeah.
And it tells me if the story ends here, you're probably going to see him in the kingdom. Right? You're going to meet him.
yeah.
Babylon is the enemy of God's people. The city of Babylon is used in Bible prophecy to describe the wickedness and the spiritual confusion of this whole world. And yet, at the end of the story, even the king of Babylon can be saved.
It gives hope for all of us,
It
doesn't
does.
it? Really
Yep.
does.
I mean, just imagine now. Imagine the day that Jesus and Nebuchadnezzar meet in the earth made known. Now, Nebuchadnezzar has seen him before,
Right.
walking around in the fiery furnace with Shadrach, Meshach,
course.
and Abednego.
Yeah.
Right? Who's that? I see someone that looks like the Son of Man walking around in the fire. God came to deliver his people out of a time of crisis. That's a whole, we could spend time on that story again too. It's a prophetic story. He saw Jesus in that fiery furnace, but now in the earth made new in the kingdom, he sees Jesus in person. Now think about this. The day that Nebuchadnezzar writes those things and shares his conversion experience with us, the cross is still in the distant future, right? Nebuchadnezzar is going to be one of those people who still has to hear the whole story. He's still going to discover what happened at the cross, that the fiery furnace was nothing compared to what Jesus had to endure for us. And you'll notice in later studies, when we get further into Daniel and Revelation, you'll notice how Jesus appears symbolically in Daniel chapter 10. He looks like bronze or brass, the Bible says, that's been refined in the furnace. It tells us he passes through the fire to save us. Zechariah 13 has this allusion to the kingdom that's coming, and somebody walks up and says, "How did you get those wounds in your hands?"
Yeah.
They've never heard the story of the crucifixion. Nebuchadnezzar will be one of those ones.
He gets to hear it.
He's going to have to complete the whole picture, and he gets to hear the rest of the story and see that, the kingdom's even greater than he imagined. He knows that when he dies, but he's going to be in the kingdom and see it for real. It's one of the most striking contrasts found anywhere in the Bible. This is human pride contrasted next to Jesus' humility. The one who deserves everything gives it all up to help correct our pride and self-sufficiency. Jesus is worthy. We think we are. But there comes a moment where you realize that everything you have was given to you by Jesus, and he's waiting and longing to see if you don't come to the conclusion that you want him, because I know what it says in the Bible. He absolutely does want you. Nebuchadnezzar in the kingdom of heaven. That's Daniel 4. By the sound of it, that's all the time we have for this week. If you didn't waste all that time drinking the water, we could have done Daniel 5 too.
Well, we got through Daniel chapter 4, though. And if our listeners want to listen more slowly and carefully, just visit us at VOP.com.
Great. Until next time, this has been Disclosure. I'm Shawn Boonstra.